Hi there, welcome back. Welcome to the second video in the restoration of this Selena B-217. This one belongs to Rene, Netherlands. And when I left off last, I was a little bit stressed out because FM was gone, or FM was almost non-existent. And I got flashbacks from the experience of the Philips Antoinette. I was really worried that I was going to have 2 in a row with failed FM. And I just couldn't handle that. So I tackled it straight away. And I've got some good news, but I'll let you find out for yourself. This one is not finished in this video. It's nearly there. I think we'll just need one more to finish it off. But I got quite a bit done on this one. It turned out to be, well, had its challenges, but it was quite a pleasure to do. So if you're interested in this sort of thing, stick around, enjoy the video. I'm going to start by admitting that I actually broke one of my main rules. My rule is usually attack the power supply, then the audio, then the radio. What I did here is I wanted to go straight for the FM because I had no FM, or very poor FM. And so I did a hell of a lot of reading, and I want to show you something. Hear that?
Foi depois de novo desfiladeiro.
All the stations that I expect to find strongly on here are coming through loud. A little bit of distortion, I must admit, not as clear as it should be, but the FM is back. And I'm going to show you what I had to do to get the FM back. It's actually proof that sometimes you've got to do more reading than tampering. And the reason I broke my rule, my first rule of, power supply and then the audio and then the radio, a few reasons. I knew the power supply was okay because I was using battery. I'm basically supplying this to the battery and I had my AM, so power was going through, okay? Secondly, the audio is certainly coming through because I was getting all the audio that I possibly wanted from the AM bands, and the FM was gone. And the other reason I attacked the FM first is because I'm suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder after my Philips Antoinette. I must admit, that thing drove me nuts. I'm still not over it. I don't like the feeling of having a beautifully restored radio that just doesn't play on FM. So I was still going through that trauma. I didn't want to have the same trauma again, so I attacked the FM, and I got it. But I did do a little bit of power supply checking before I went ahead, and I'll show you what that was now. I mentioned in the previous video that the only adjustment that I made that got the audio up on FM was this trim pot over here. And I wasn't sure what was going on because when I looked at the schematic, which I couldn't really read too well till I studied it a little bit further, this thing was actually just adjusting the bias on a transistor. I thought it was adjusting an audio bias. What it actually does is it creates another voltage reference. It creates another supply voltage of 4.4 volts. Now, one of the instructions in the alignment schedule that they have there, which is not as clear as it could be, but it's clear enough, they tell you to check that you get supply onto this section of the board. They tell you to look for the 8.5 volts, and they tell you to adjust or check for the 4.4 volts. And okay, you're going to laugh now, but I was looking at the board layout, which shows me 3 or 4 transistors on here, and I could only see one, this guy over here. As it happens, these little yellow things are transistors as well. I must admit, I've never seen them before. That's another transistor, the orange one. These are Russian transistors. Never worked with them before. There's another one back there. So I was a little bit baffled. I thought maybe I had the layouts for the different radio. As it happens, it's correct. And I found there's one particular resistor which can give me both readings at the same time, both the 8.5 and the 4.4. And that is that resistor over here. I'll show you where it is in the schematic. One side of it should give me the 8.5, and the other side of it should give me 4.4, which I can adjust with that trimmer there. And I'll show you what I'm getting. So I have the radio on, the volume is off, but if I check that guy there, 8.1, a little bit low, but not too bad. And on that side, it should be 4.4. Now, if I go to here, which is the one that I had tweaked, I can adjust it to 4.4. So that adjustment is something that I did. And then I started on the capacitors. Let me explain what I found here. I had to lift this board up. So this is what I did and the order that I did it in case you want to do it yourself. Firstly, I took a photograph of this section and I desoldered these wires from the FM unit. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Desoldered them, lifted them up. There was one that I had to desolder as well, which is this red wire over here, which is the antenna wire coming from the rod. You had to lift it a bit, desolder from the bottom and pull it out. So this side of the board is now completely free of wires. There's a whole lot of them up there, and that's the problem. Then I removed 3 screws. 1, where's the other one? 1 there, 2 and 3. 3 screws over here. Took those out. And then this board lifts out, okay? Now, when I lifted that out, I found something interesting. Remember when I was playing with this and I moved it back? It was making a hell of a lot of noise, short. Well, the reason became obvious when I lifted this board. This shield, which goes underneath this section, was completely loose. It was just lying flat there. So obviously when this thing was bending slightly backwards, it was shorting something out. So that's it. The solder came off there. It wasn't soldered at all. I can see solder broken here, so that explains that. So that's the other problem. I haven't put it in yet because I'm not sure that I've finished the section yet. Then I went and tackled the usual capacitors, okay? Electrolytics, there's one there, there's one there, and there's one underneath there as well. All those electrolytics read crazy values. Well, crazily, 60, 70% too high. So I replaced them. I replaced them with quality caps. Because I can't get hold of the actual caps to make them more similar to this one, I normally take a radial cap. I bend the negative backwards. I extend that one, wrap it in heat shrink, and then label it. And I like the look of it. It looks better than, you know, having a radial cap sticking out here. It's no big deal. I just didn't want to go to the trouble of actually drilling those things out. They are a pain. So that's what I normally do, and that's what I did in this one as well. Then I decided to go for the little beads, you know, the little red ones that I mentioned. They are really, really small. They have no values written on them, but this is what it looks like. And the ones I removed on this board, there's one over here where it is C5. Can't see where it is right now. It's somewhere there. That one was actually reading 51 picofarads, which is exactly what it's supposed to be. So I put it back. The other 3 or 4 were completely out. Really out. Look at these pictures. I've taken pictures of the meter. First slot's supposed to be 22 picofarads. Look at the values they're at. Okay. The last one's supposed to be 51 picofarads. And look what that is at. So those were definitely bad, and I replaced them. There's one there. There's one there. There's another one somewhere in here. And the capacitor numbers on the schematic, I can give them to you. They are capacitor 19, 27, 32, and 53. First 3 are supposed to be 24 picofarads. I replaced them with 22s. And the last one is 51. I replaced that with the 51, which I happen to have. Now that is in the FM IF strip. The IF transformers are on this line and they are forming the resonance circuits with the IF transformer. So if they go out of value, the adjustment of those transformers is completely impossible, which is why our FM is completely deaf. This whole IF strip was badly tuned because you've changed one of the components of the tank circuit. Not the coil, but the capacitor. Same thing, throws the whole thing out of tune. So I replaced that, and that's when I did a check. I put it all back, did a check, and it's back. It's back, and it's pretty loud. And the reason it's louder than usual is because I had tweaked this. It was higher than it's supposed to be. It was supposed to be 4.4, and I think when I tweaked it, it was 5.4. the whole voltage reference was out, and that's another reason why the amplification was higher than it's supposed to be, because it's set with this trimmer. And with this thing back, I think I have this entire board ready to put in permanently. I'll have to desolder these guys again. I'll have to put this back in, put it back, and put the screws on, and I think this board will be done. What I probably will do, knowing now that I've got FM back, and of course I will check it once I've resoldered the shield, just to make sure I've messed anything up, that's when I'm going to remove this from the case and work on the audio and supply sections, really working backwards to the way I normally do things. And then of course, I'll come back here, I'll have to look at the instructions, and I will do an IF alignment. This thing does need to be realigned because, well, there are one or two here that are actually, they seem to have been tweaked. Somebody must have pulled them right out, trying to tune it, compensating for the capacitance value that it altered. But it's still good enough that it's getting the signal through, which is why I'm receiving FM, okay? So that's what I will do after I've done the audio section. As I said, I'm still tempted to stuff these guys because I do like them. I like the original look of them. They're clunky, which is what the general feel of this radio. And now I'm feeling a lot happier. Some of the traumatic stress has worked itself off from the Antoinette. So yeah, okay. It's feeling much, much better. Right, since that last shot, things don't look very different, but I can tell you they are. This has been put back completely. I've put the shield, soldered the shield on the underside, found the right points. That's the ground points, all four corners. So that's in, that's been soldered back. These screws have been put back on, and the important thing is that this screw here actually holds the FM front end in place. So you've got to make sure you get that in place before you take it out of the cabinet, and that's what I'm going to do next. And the first thing you do when you want to remove this thing from the cabinet is to remove these knobs. Now, there's a problem. This one came out. This one came out. That one won't. So what you do is you go into the kitchen, wait till your wife is away, and you get 2 teaspoons. And you go to your wife's cabinet in the bathroom and steal 2 of these makeup removers. And this is what you have to do. You put that underneath. You put the makeup remover underneath so you don't scratch the surface. This could get tricky. Oh, come on. And do that. And there we go. And now I've figured out why this thing was a little bit wobbly. It's broken in the past. Okay, but the point is, it's out. This one is also very tough. So we'll use the same trick. And there we go. We've removed the knobs without scratching the surface. Put these away safely, and that part is done. Now you've got to remove this side selector, and you move this around till you see that screw there. And that's another one done. And then, like an idiot, you start looking for screws to move this out of the cabinet, and you find out that it actually slides forward, and that you probably did not need to remove those knobs at all. Anyway, they've got to be cleaned, so I'll just get it out of the cabinet and see where we are. Now see, here's the problem that I mentioned earlier. This thing now no longer stands by itself. If you put it down there, you put a bit of pressure on there, so you've got to be careful. Best thing to do would be to find something to be able to stand it up on one of the hard edges. Let's do that slowly. Here's something that's fairly soft. Okay. Now I believe, I'll have to look at this and see how this thing comes out. I believe this comes off and that turns out or something like that. I'll just have a quick look at it and see how we get along. I do want to remove this because I want to recap it. Well, it seems I do have to remove the front, or it'll make it easier. And the way to do that is actually to release these guys. These are those standoffs into which the back cover connects. And you just loosen these, and I believe the whole front will come off. You probably have to desolder the antenna or something, but that's what you get for them. I just had to remove the antenna from, or the antenna wire from there, from the actual rod. I also just need to desolder the speaker wires. I'm not even sure right now whether I did need to remove this front, but it's going to need some cleaning, so I just want to record how it was done in case I need to refer to it later. We'll see. And here we are. The front is off. I had to just desolder the speaker wires. There's not much here except perhaps I can lubricate the pulleys, clean it up a bit, not that it needs much. And I think I may have to loosen that screw to get this board out the back. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is just study it a bit, see how to remove the board, and get cracking. All right, folks, as usual, I got carried away. But let me show you what I've done. These are the capacitors that I replaced on that board. There are 3 more, the big ones, which I'll explain what I did in a minute. And what I did is I removed this screw and I removed this screw up here. And that allows this section to move back. And then once this comes back, you can flip it out. Obviously, there's a lot of wires over there, so you've got to, move them around a bit. I had to desolder one of them, this blue one, because it was holding this back. But once I got that out, I got this fairly well moved out of the way, and I was able to get to the components, the underside and the top side. So those capacitors were not a big deal to replace. Now, what about the big ones? As you can see, I managed to save them. Or did I? Well, not really. I removed this one completely from the underside. And the way this works is that this capacitor has the shield, the external, the outside of the capacitor is the ground of the capacitor. And it has 3 plugs or 3 pins coming down here. So you get 1, 2, 3. And then you've got the center one, which is the actual positive connection of the capacitor. So you've got to desolder 4 points over there, remove it. That wasn't a problem. The problem was actually, trying to restuff this thing. And it was not easy. I drilled at the bottom. This thing has the, it's got a ridge at the bottom, so it's not fully open like the big electrolytics from the tube radios or anything like that. It took me ages to remove the stuffing from this thing. It's very, very, very difficult. And so, okay, I got that one out. I put a 1000 microfarad capacitor in there. This is a 500, 1000. I put 1000 anyway, because this is the first capacitor after the rectifier. And I figured this thing could probably need a bit more smoothing. These capacitors are cheap and they're fairly small, but I put one in there and I put that back. And then I was going to start on these guys. And I realized something. The holes that these guys come into are really big. And there is space on the underside. So what I did was I sucked the solder out from the central hole. I left the ground connected. I desoldered the central hole, got all the solder out from around the pin, and then I plugged it with a bit of heat shrink that actually went through the board. So that positive of that capacitor was completely isolated from the actual PCB. And then I did this. I put those 2 capacitors on the underside, connected to the respective points, obviously not to the actual positive of the now unused capacitor, but to the pad around it. And I've got 2 1000 microfarad capacitors on the underside here, which are doing the job of those 2 that I've left for cosmetic purposes, which is really what I wanted to do. And so I'm left with the result that I wanted, a fully recapped board, and with the original clunkiness still in line on the radio. I did not want to remove that. Something else you might notice is that this thing is loose. The way to remove that is that you have these clips coming through the black plastic. You've got to straighten these out and you pull this out. There are 2 over here and 2 more on the underside. So this thing came out and it made it a lot easier for me to get to the solder connections. But it also serves another purpose. As you can see, the headphone socket is out now. The reason I wanted to remove this is I'm going to do something about this headphone socket. Rene, the owner, wanted to have a stereo socket. It's going to receive mono, but he wanted to have audio coming out of both left and right. And I have to replace this with a stereo socket, but it has to have a switch in it because the audio comes to here, switches straight through to the speaker. This white wire is the speaker wire. And when you plug in your headphone, it breaks that connection, and then your headphone gets the audio. You can get that in stereo as well. Obviously, it'll be the audio coming in to one of the switches, and I'll have to rewire this to make sure that the same thing happens as would happen when you plug in a socket on here. In other words, the speaker signal will be cut off, but you would have audio coming out of both sides. Now, I've got a socket for that. I've got it over here, but it's a bit old, and I'll get one on Monday, a new one, and replace that there. So I'm leaving this out for now. The other thing is I had to look at this mains connector and decide what to do with it. Now, here's the problem. This mains connector is a special connector. Now, according to George Christophe, who's got 23 or 21 of these things. George, you've got to see someone about this. He's got 21 of them. He's got 9 of these connectors. He says you can still get them. I have never seen them. I've asked him to tell me where I can get one. But in the meantime, I had a thought. This mains connector's got a problem. If you got mains connected on here, the only way to switch off the radio is to unplug the mains connector. That's exactly what it says in the manual. I could not believe it. This switch on here only operates for the battery. This switches on the battery on and off, or switches the radio on and off when it's operating on battery. So I figured I could do something slightly different. What I decided to do is there was a hole on here already which was not used. And it's obviously for one of those, it's got an earth sign here, ground. So this is obviously for a DC input anyway. So I put in a DC jack on here. This one has got a switch system on here as well. And I'm going to wire the battery to there and then to this on-off switch. That's this, where is it? I think it's this wire over here. Goes straight from the positive of the battery to the on-off switch at the top here. I'm going to bring that to here. And when there is nothing on here, it'll go straight through to the switch. When you plug something in here, the power that's plugged in will go to the switch. So you'll be able to use a 9-volt external supply, a wall wart, anything that gives you 9 volts DC instead of a battery, or you could still use the battery. And you're left with a mains option, just in case. Actually, this wire is just desoldered. Just seen that. Got to solder it to there. We don't want that loose. But you could still use the battery as the mains power as an option if you can get a cable for it. So that's why this thing is still hanging loose here. But what I do have is I've got this thing ready to put the faceplate on and test it. I have still got to do the lubrication. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to lubricate these pulleys, do a bit of cleaning on here. As I said, there's not much to do. This thing is perfectly set up. It's going to the end. I won't have to worry about that. These 2 dial lamps are working. I tested it. When I put power to the back, you hit that and both these dial lamps come on. So this can be completed. This front will be completed. I'll just put the front on and the knobs, re-solder the speaker, and I'll be able to test it again. And here she is, the final result. Now, I came across something quite interesting here while I was trying the shortwave. I got onto the 40 meter band, and this is going on. It's the usual SSB audio that you get when you don't have a BFO. And so I decided to bring out my BFO. I adjusted the IF frequency to 465, which is what this is. And I'll let you listen to a bit of that.
Alpha, November, Tango, Oscar, November, Alpha Novi, Tango, Oscar, Novi, from the island of La Palma, over. QSL, John Echo, India 3, Golf, Zulu Echo, Alpha 8, Delta, India, Golf. Mind you, antenna, step AIDB36. Have you got a few minutes to try it, Roger?
And then, of course, we carry on. I'm going to go to shortwave 4. Wait a minute, where are we? 5 will probably, or rather 3 will probably be a little busier. This is with absolutely no alignment. Medium wave. Picking up Canary Islands perfectly. Long wave. And of course, FM.
Em Leiria, casa importada do Casa Pia por 1-0, o mesmo resultado, essa margem mínima conseguiu.
And our AFC is working perfectly. There's something strange here. AFC is actually on when the button is out. If you put it in, that's when it holds. See that? So AFC out, the button out, it's actually activated. Sounds like we've got football going on. So that's where I'm going to leave you for today. I'm going to get on with the alignment. I want to do the final alignment, which I'll report back to you and do a final test for you. I want to do these little bits and pieces here with the jack socket and the external DC supply. And I think that we're almost there. We're almost there. But I'm going to leave you for now, and thank you for your company. Hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, click like, share, subscribe, and all that jazz. And if you want to support the channel directly, you can do so on Patreon or on PayPal. Links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Bye for now, and stay safe.